Hello and welcome back to the Converge Podcast. It is almost mid-September 2025, pushing towards Q4. We're back from a little August hiatus. Everybody was on the beach, understandably, and now here we are sitting down with some of the best minds in fintech. Today is Travis Mottershead from Very Good Security, or VGS. I've got my co-host Alana back with me. Good to see you, and good to welcome you on, Travis. We'll be talking one of our favorite topics, which is compliance, but more compliance as a competitive advantage in payment infrastructure. And VGS, of course, has a lot to say on this. I'm excited to expose our audiences to VGS and what you guys do. So, Alana, go ahead and let's put Travis on the stand and start
Yeah.
start talking through this deep, meaty topic.
Yes, I love it. And Travis, thanks so much for joining us. Travis and I worked together when I had time at VGS, and then randomly ran into each other at FinTech DevCon in Denver. And it was just a great opportunity to reconnect, see how VGS has kind of evolved during my time there, right? And then I thought, well, gosh, this is so interesting. We have to memorialize it on the pod. So here we are. Travis, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start kind of with just like a quick background about you, and then we'll kind of get more into VGS. So, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of the road that led you to your current role at VGS. Where, who are you? What do you do? What is your passion? And then we can get more into VGS.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. First off, guys, thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting. Convera is definitely one of my favorite companies in the industry, and
Woohoo!
so happy to be a part of the podcast.
Great to
But
hear it.
so yeah, I'm based up in Edmonton, up in Canada, and I've been in software for many years. I started writing software when I was a teenager and like became incredibly passionate about it, or obsessive about it when I was very young. And then I moved into I worked for various different companies, building software. I kind of fell into the fintech industry, like the enterprise fintech industry, building gateways and cashiering software for a lot of the governments around the world. And out of that, I ended up, I spent a lot of time building software. I was lucky to have some time in the go-to-market side, got learning how to work with customers, moved over to implementation, and like understood how projects go, how things can actually be successful, what kind of products do you need to be successful, how do you talk about them, and I think I think I've just always been incredibly curious about the way the world works, so I keep bouncing from like, I wanna understand the next and I want to understand the next industry or the next part of the business world. It's just fun to get to know things.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I definitely remember when you joined VGS, we were like, who's this rising star? Right. It's just, there was so much talent and passion there. And I really believe like passion is part, right, of of what drives like a super performer. A lot of it is passion. So I guess dovetailing into VGS specifically, um, who is VGS? Well, first, Very Good Security is kind of a funny name. And, why Very Good Security? Why not something,
Superior
um,
security.
yeah, superior security, the best, right? Why is it just very good? I'm sure there must be a story there. Do tell.
yeah, yeah, and we hear that a lot, and I asked the same question when I found out about the company. It's a so very good security. It's so evident that our company was founded by software like deep software engineers who built compliance software because uh very good security is a play on pretty good privacy, which is a way of securing and or it's a way of encrypting data at rest,
Mhm.
and it's an industry standard on encryption. So, back in the day, I love talking with the co-founders about this, but instead of pretty good privacy, this is very good security. So it was the evolution of pretty good privacy. So it's a yeah, it's a fun question that I get to answer, uh,
That's
quite
awesome.
often.
That's good. So, Travis, how does solution delivery at VGS specifically differ from traditional implementation teams? What's your framework for balancing like speed, scalability, payments innovation and compliance? Because the two can be counterintuitive, right?
Totally, totally. This is probably one of this is one of my favorite topics, I think, is understanding like what is like how to make things successful. VDS is this really interesting it it's at this really interesting place where we are serving the world's largest companies. And then as part of that, we are building software to support them and processes to support them. And then we're also supporting small businesses, small and medium businesses. So I think really the question is how do you do both at the same time? How do you balance the agility that the small businesses need with just the inherent complexity of working with a major organization that works globally, and they can't necessarily swivel on a dime. You have to plan up front. So how does VGS differ in that way? We have structured. So I'll give a few different perspectives here. On a product side, we always build it with uh, we build it in mind that it needs to be doable by the customer, and we're always architecting so that the customer can take it and then they can run with it themselves. That's our goal. And then from an implementation standpoint, we structure the team so that there are very in-depth designs going into a project. I always every time I'm working on a project, I think it's okay if we come up with a plan, knowing the plan will change, and
Right.
the plans are created to change. But if there's no plan, then you know that you're going to run into problems.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's
so
where chaos ensues.
yes, yes. So especially with those enterprise clients, we spend a lot of time. We have a team of solutions architects and project managers, and they spend a lot of time working with these clients, understanding how PGS fits in, and then on and then from a product standpoint, we build the product so that it's as little effort as possible. Every action should have a multiplier effect. So every
Mm.
time our customers onboard to the platform, they should be getting they should that effort should unlock as much um, as much value as it can. And that we have a return on effort calculator that we use internally. So for every week that the customers work on the product and like to spend implementing the product, how much value do they get out of that? And it's
That's a terrific model. That's really, really cool. And for the listeners out there, right, VGS powers, I mean, Travis will tell us, I'm sure, how much card data, but also a lot of remittance providers out there. I mean, you could name a bunch, perhaps, folks included here. So, really exciting stuff that you guys are doing over there.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely fun. I think on that, a very interesting thing about VGS is y- our people need to be very technical because we're working with the engineers a lot of the time and helping design the payments infrastructure.
Mm.
And then we also have to be the payments experts. And so as I've loved working at this company and getting to understand deeply the payment space and deeply the technical space, and because they aren't inherently the same thing, and I maybe that's like the beautiful convergence of fintech
Well,
is
yeah, 100%. It's the same with us here, right? Each organization or each partner, kind of does cross-border, embedded cross-border, payments, power software with our pay rails differently. And it's like that modular infrastructure that you're moving. But the implementation, as we've discussed prior, is always unique. So it keeps us on our toes.
totally, totally. I always say it rhymes, but it's not the exact same. Every implementation rhymes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. So obviously I'm learning on the fly here, but would love to like dig in on sort of the strategy and execution behind compliance as architecture. and how VGS embeds compliance into delivery and architecture. How do you ensure we talked about this episode focusing on compliance as a strategic asset, not just a checkbox. How do you ensure that you are able to do that and implement it so it's not just, a one-off? And, data security obviously is table stakes today. There's, a scamdemic that's been pervasive for the last several years. How are you ensuring that this is baked into a company and not just, something that is checked off as a sidebar?
Yeah, that's so how do we ensure that compliance is a strategic asset? And I think that the main way that we do that is we say compliance is something that customers need just to operate, like you were saying about the scamdemic, Alex. So how do we make it so that by getting compliance, you also unlock all of the things that you don't just need, but you want as a business? So you want to understand your customers, you want value added services to lower costs of your payments. And so what BGS does is we architect the product suite so that by getting compliance and by building your services in a compliant way, you are unlocking the value. This goes back to that return on effort concept that I was talking about.
Mhm.
Rather than just getting the compliance, you're getting all these other services that maybe the compliance team is forcing you to build things a certain way. So you're working with the compliance team, or the one department will work with the compliance team, and so compliance gets what they need, but also we have the payments team, and they all of a sudden get what they want, and we have the marketing team, they can get what they want to do their work. So it's compliance just becomes a driver for the business to all of a sudden unlock all of what they want.
So being able to operate on that payments data, like, kind of cross-functionally almost.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think the reason it works so well is because data has to be compliant. And so data needs to be stored in a certain way, it needs to be understood in a certain way. And so it becomes this nexus for all of the data to come to one point. And out of that point, you can all of a sudden give everybody what they want with it in a secure way.
Awesome.
So, I mean, I think so far we've talked a lot about payments, a lot about compliance, how VGS has this like kind of two-pronged value where it's like, okay, we've settled that like undifferentiated heavy lifting and that compliance cost center, and we've helped innovate, right? VGS helps the product, strategists and the product innovation folks as well. Why don't you give us kind of like your overview of VGS, right? And like what would be, say, the elevator pitch, right? We were talking about that at FinTech DevCon. I think with like the GM of Starbucks, he's like, give us the elevator pitch. So we would love to hear what that is, around VGS. And then, kind of like uh, we can get into some of the standards for payment partners or clients and all of that that potentially it can solve for without sacrificing functionality. Because I don't think we've like div- dove into VGS the way it's due.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should
yeah.
have started out with this. I don't know why we
Right, right.
but at least we're
Oh,
getting to it now.
Yeah.
thank you guys. Thank you guys. Okay, great opportunity. So what I think the elevator for VGS, the elevator pitch for VGS is merchants and fintechs that store their data on VGS, they they get compliance and they unlock value-added services for that data. So let's say it a different way. Payment credentials that are stored on VGS are secure and they are more valuable than if they weren't stored on VGS. What the way that this works is you store data with VGS, or you store credit cards with VGS, debit cards with VGS, bank accounts with VGS. All of a sudden, we can do things like we can give you at value added, or we can give you insights into that payment credential. we can say who the issuer was, what geography is it from. That can then be mapped up to, is this what I expect? Is this a card coming from Malaysia, but it's being paid in the US and I'm seeing it 100 times? We'll also do things like enrich the card data. So when there's an update to your credit card, or if you're like me and you lost your credit card in an airport a few months ago, then you call your bank and that updated credit card is sent out. VGS on the other side is the one who picked up that credit card information, the new detail, and sent it out to all the merchants that I was associated to. So
Wow.
that's the account updater capabilities, and which is obviously for a subscription business that's huge because uh, these subscription businesses don't want credit cards will expire roughly once every 4 years by default, and so if you're using those for subscription payments with multiple different payment processors potentially, you don't want 25% of your payments to stop working every year. So
Yeah.
you have to continually be getting that feed of payments data. And then that goes into offering things like network tokens and being able to enrich data that way. And network tokens is another way that these credentials can be kept up to date and we can lower the cost of those payments. Really exciting stuff. What VGS is focusing on mainly right now, and Alana, maybe this is a few elevators long, but what what VGS is focusing on mainly right now uh, is is supporting the world's largest merchants to be able to get the tools but that used to be locked behind PSPs. So
Mm.
if you years ago you would work with Stripe or Adyen or Braintree, and they would have all this tooling that they used to build their business.
Mhm.
And then as time goes on, the merchants, the world's largest merchants understand what is actually available. And then they start asking for those same services. They want the account updater services directly. They don't want to go through the PSP.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. So that's kind of a lot of stuff about cards, right? And payments related to cards. I mean, what do you see? Because you do power remittance providers, marketplaces, things like that too. I mean, what do you see around, you know, kind of standards with payment partners or direct clients that have multi-regulatory, truly, global types of use cases that are like a mix of varying payments, right? Maybe there's some card modalities and they're using you for this, but then there's, pay by bank in the wild, other things like that. I mean, have you guys been working in that space? What do you typically see, even related, say, to cross-border providers and things like that?
Yeah, really, really good question. And I think one of the main ways that we're working with those organizations, I would say that there's two. There are two things. There is uh, we are helping with on the compliance standpoint, specifically with the data, with the data ownership in making sure the data stays in one geography. And then the other one is making sure that we have low latency for all those different payment flows. If a payment is coming from Southeast Asia, it needs to be processed in Southeast Asia, or else, and it can't go all the way around the world to the United
Yes.
States, because then all of a sudden you have a bad payment experience.
Yep. Yep.
And so these real time payments, especially things that are instinct purchases
Mhm.
for that's where VGS does a great job with on a latency perspective. I would l But then on the ownership standpoint, the way that and I'll talk a little bit about our architecture. We've templatized a lot of the we have templatized a lot of how we can deploy our services,
Mm.
so that and we call it cell-based architecture. So we can stand up a new cell in a region, or we could deploy an entirely new region.
Mm.
That ensures that any of the payments that are happening in Europe can remain in Europe and they can be easily maintained and segregated from the rest of the US payments.
Because they need 3DS and all these other things, right? So kind of to the point of geography, there's different nuances, right?
Totally, totally. That's exactly right. And all likewise when it comes to other jurisdictions, if there's any reason to segregate that data, then we can do that. VGS fundamentally, and that standpoint is data that needs to be compliant for an organization. It is first routed through VGS. So let's say it goes from the client. Alana, this is to your question about how are we powering remittance providers
Mm.
and other global providers. So data that needs to be compliant, it is first routed through VGS, and then VGS will tokenize all of the data. We then forward the tokenized data onto the customer. And
Mm.
so in in your example with the remittance providers, data comes in, data that they want to process comes into VGS. We tokenize it all. That may be through files, that may be through just an HTTP call. That's what I'm referring to with low latency.
Yep.
But then we'll tokenize everything, forward it on to the customer. That now all of a sudden they are dealing with the tokenized data, which is inherently compliant. That's
Right.
so
They
with that.
operate on that format preserving type of token.
Exactly, exactly. So they're operating on tokenized data that could be bank account numbers. In the case of some payment methods, it could be credit cards, as we were saying before. It could be all these different payment methods. It can get tokenized the same way it could get processed. If it needs to go to a different provider, let's say you're taking it in, you need to ship it off to a compliance vendor, or some risk vendor or a payment processor.
Yep.
Could be n number of third parties. You then take that tokenized data, you route it through VGS using the HTTP proxy, and then that vendor gets the original data, but our customer is still only dealing with the compliant tokenized data.
Yeah. So they're completely de-scoped from that like in-scope data. That's all handled by VGS, but they can operate it like it's real, you know?
Correct,
It's
correct.
pretend.
It's it's a I don't know if it's pretend. It's a permanent reference to the original data,
Yeah.
but our customer doesn't need to store that original data.
Right,
So
right. Yeah.
it's always compliant.
Yeah. So when you're doing an integration, like what does a typical integration process look like for just like a payments use case, right? Tell us about the implementation and then some of the friction points, right?
Yeah, yeah, really good question. So on a from a payments perspective, when we start a project, we think about it in a few different ways. It is where are you collecting card data from? Because it might be from a browser. If it's a merchant, let's say a global merchant, they may be collecting credit card data from or other types of payment information from the US, from the EU, from APAC, from uh maybe Antarctica. There's a lot of different payments use cases. Sorry, we don't yet have an Antarctica region deployment.
I was
Maybe
like,
maybe
disclaimer.
maybe in the future. But
Antarctica is really an emerging market if
it's
you haven't heard.
if it's anything, it's an emerging market. Yeah. So when you're designing the payment system, you think, where am I collecting card data from? It might be through the browser, or if we're building let's say we're helping a payment orchestration service build their platform. That could be through an API, and then that API could be global, or it could be LATAM specific or Europe specific. So we think, where's data coming in from? And then where am I sending data? So that data could be it could be going to Stripe, Adyen, eBanks, all the different payment service providers. Uh, and then so how am I collecting data? How am I sending it? But then uh, so those are the two main flows: collecting data, sending data, and then it's how am I enriching the data? So that comes to how am I keeping my cards up to date, like I was talking about before with Account Updater. Do I need network tokens to lower my cost of processing or increase my authorization rates? Do I need 3DS because VGS can offer the 3DS service? And then do I need to do card validation? So when a card comes in, do I need to validate it with like a $0 auth, or do I need to do an ANI check for it to validate the name on the card, or an address check? So you're seeing it starts at the beginning. How am I getting data? Where does it need to end up? And then what are all the steps that have to happen in between? And we have a very thorough process for how we document those payment flows so that
Yeah.
they're as simple as possible.
Well, and it's good that you guys always know that it may change because I've been in some of those implementations and in the middle, they're like, oh, wait, we have this other idea, right?
Totally. And that's like the way that we think about it is with the right if we design the product so that it's flexible but powerful, then when those new ideas come up and those new use cases come up, then it's exciting. It's not a
Yes.
burden because it's easy to just toggle on features.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
say, "Oh, now we want to do a $0 auth when we collect a card, so we want to be able to toggle that feature on." Or some, uh so maybe the risk department wants to be able to get insight into the cards on file to say, where are these cards actually physically located? Where are they being issued from?
Yep.
And maybe they want to see how many are prepaid debit cards versus non. So that's the kind of details that we just want to be able to flip it on and give our customers that data. We don't want to make them do extra work.
That's really cool.
Makes a lot of sense. I want to shift over to obviously AI's role in payment data flows. And this is particularly interesting to me because we're actually putting out a report at the end of this month around AI's outsized impact in payment flows, and particularly the new risks involved with, implementing agentic AI into these types of highly compliant flows. So, how is VGS preparing for the next wave of inevitable payment challenges that will stem from the introduction of artificial intelligence and all types of you know, agentic flows, fully autonomous agentic flows in payments? And if you can talk a little bit about how that might impact the cross-border space, that would be great.
Yeah, totally. Great. Thanks, Alex. Great question. Very topical for this time. And I think so. First and foremost, AI is being talked about across the board in the industry. Visa came out with major announcements. Mastercard is making major announcements. VGS we are partnering very closely to be first movers in that space when for all of the new technology that is coming out, all the new infrastructure that's needed to support these payment flows. And uh, a- at a very at a very simple level, VGS is working with these AI providers so that to let's go back to what I was talking about before, where we're collecting data and we're sending data, and then we're doing all these steps in between. In an AI perspective or an agentic commerce perspective, we are still collecting data, but now all of a sudden it is from a chat interface potentially. It's not from a browser like a traditional browser. It's not from an API. It is from the chat experience. And then when we're sending it, that chat experience that needs to collect the data could be sending it over to a PSP, or they could, in order to pay for their own subscriptions, or they could be sending it over to a merchant to purchase goods. And so how do we enable that experience? How do we say you can collect from the chat and then you can pay out to a PSP and the merchant? In order to do that, there's a lot of work we're doing around issuing network tokens, working with Visa and Mastercard to ensure that we're following best practices there with the technologies that they are providing. But also uh, uh, because VGS offers the HTTP proxy, we allow that provider to take our tokenized data, to take the VGS tokens, and then they can using AI, they can dynamically load those into a payment form just on any merchant website. And then that payment form can be proxied through VGS so that before it reaches a merchant, it's turned back into the original PAN or CVV. So it's a very technical solution, and I'm really excited about it. Like I could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah, no, that's super fascinating. Um, I mean, just to dovetail into that, I mean, Alana wanted to ask about that next wave of fintech innovation. This is highly related to that. So go ahead, Alana.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure a lot of it is, kind of agentic commerce and AI related and all of that. But I mean, because you guys are close and power most of the fintech 250 and all of that. I mean, I'm sure you have that look around the corner. You see, right, what those product innovators are building today. You're building with them. How are you preparing or what do you really see in that next wave of fintech innovation with, AI driven fraud detections, right? Decentralized identities, all that stuff. What do you think, Travis predictions for 2026? What do you see is going to be like near term and then maybe long term?
Yeah, yeah, real okay, I love that, and yeah, this is a Travis prediction.
Yep.
This is I
Hashtag.
think, a hashtag Travis prediction. The we are so in the next year, I think what we're going to see is the agentic commerce is going to start to take off. And then what merchants are going to start asking for is understanding and validation that this is a valid credential. I think that there's going to be some inherent questions about fraud as it starts to happen. And so VGS, we're positioning ourselves so that we are right in the mix in order to support the merchants to be able to take the agentic commerce payments because it's a new flow. It's not something that the world has done before. And so merchants are going to start pushing back and asking for certain verification of and validation that these are valid payments, that they won't be that they're sure that when they come in, the agent is acting on behalf of the correct person.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense because fraudsters move fast. So as soon as like there's a new workflow, they've figured out how to exfiltrate it for the most part.
Exactly, exactly. And so from VGS's perspective, we're thinking how can we support the validation of the user, and how can we give these agentic providers the tools that they need in order to build confidence with the merchants.
Yeah, all good stuff.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered a lot of what we were sort of set out to discuss, and I have obviously I would love to learn more about what you guys are doing and go in more depth on the agentic stuff, but that's for another episode for sure. Travis, I'm glad we got to be introduced to VGS and yourself. It was great to meet you, and thank you for taking the time to share all you've been doing with our audiences here at Converge and Convera.
Yes. Thank you both, Alex, Alana. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Likewise.